One of my favorite parts of the Harry Potter series is that portion where Harry, Ron, and Hermione are, of course, traveling and, of course, fleeing from some type of danger. But in this one particular section, they're out in the wilderness for a long time, and they have this ability to create a tent that no one else can see. They, with the flick of a wand and a few words, suddenly pops up this tent that really no one can see, but inside it looks sort of like a Park Avenue apartment. They each have their own room, there's a fire going, there's food, but they're safe. They're safe there from all the scary dangers of the Death Eaters. I remember watching that and reading it in the books and thinking, oh my gosh, how wonderful just to be able to create that space for yourself anytime, at any place that no one else could see. I think it's a really compelling image, this image of a hiding place. If you've been around children much or remember your own childhood, or maybe you still do this, I don't know, that really instinctual thing of making forts. All the old blankets and quilts get pulled down and pulled out, and the sofa cushions get piled in some sort of form, and a little structure is built, and it's a perfect little place to sort of be tucked away. We want these spaces, this very innate thing, but we need them as adults too. We need them as teenagers, we need them all along the way. These spaces are especially needed when something is really weighing on us, when we need to finally say the thing that is withering away our spirit, the thing or things that are eating away at our bones. Our psalm today is a really lovely literary mirroring of 3 different Hebrew words for sin and 3 different Hebrew words for forgiveness, and they matter. For sin, we've got transgression, which is really more of an act of rebellion against God. We've also got this idea of just getting off the path, like taking a wrong turn, but knowing you were taking a wrong turn. And then we sort of have this idea of generally missing the mark. With forgiveness, we have forgiveness that is a lifting up, a carrying away. It's actually the word that we get NASA from. It's the Hebrew word for lift up, carry away, as a kind of forgiveness. We also have this sense of covering up, of being hidden in God's, like being hidden by God from sin. And then the last word for forgiveness is this idea of being made righteous and imputing righteousness to us. I think these things ring pretty true because we as people often experience conviction, guilt, and shame. I mean, certainly we know there are times when we just make a choice other than we know what God would want us to do. We've all done that. It's like taking the car when your parents told you not to. That kind of really clear thing. I think the same thing probably goes for those times when God is asking us to do something. We know there's something we should do, and we just don't want to. We keep avoiding it, avoiding the difficult conversation, avoiding owning our own part in a broken relationship, and so forth. I would call this kind of real specific transgression or act of transgression as conviction. That sort of feeling that we get in our gut. It's usually pretty specific. So as kids, we know this. If you've, again, been around kids or raised them, there'll be times when they come home and they say, I feel really bad about something. I need to tell you something. I said something mean to someone on the playground today, and I feel bad about it. These kinds of things, that kind of innocence. Sometimes as we grow up, we lose or we get a little bit out of touch with that ability to be that sensitive to those types of things that we do. We can justify them, we can cover them up, whatever that is. And when eventually these things catch up with us, we have this experience of guilt. And again, it's pretty specific, and it's kind of a needed experience of guilt. but not needed in the sense of we just hang on to it and feel really bad and have our bones wither away within us. That's a really terrible, terrible feeling, and it zaps our life. And there's a song out right now that I just love, Sarah Bareilles, if I'm saying that correctly. But Brave, do you guys know that song? It's such a great song. And the chorus just goes, say what you want to say, just let the words fall out. Honestly, I want to see you be brave. It's this beautiful song, and I think, yeah, that's bravery, that's courage. Because to not do so really kind of kills us. And as Christians, we know we don't have to be sick like that. We know that we can be released from those things. Now, confession is not any kind of magic wand. We're not spared, of course, the natural consequences of whatever we've done or not done. And if we don't pay rent, something happens, right? Most of the time. But we're restored in spirit to be able to accept the consequences and to accept grace and to accept the love of community and to move forward. So here comes this word forgiveness that's really like to lift up, to take off of us that feeling that can be really crippling when we get it out. The saying that we're as sick as our secrets is pretty true sometimes. I'm not Catholic at all. I was never raised Catholic. But if I could adopt one piece of the Catholic tradition, it would be the Catholic confessional. What a lovely thing to just have a place where you can just go and say all the things that you need to say and have it be part of your worship life when done well. For a while, it's been said that the therapist office is now the Catholic confessional. I think that's probably pretty true. And that's needed. It's super important. But we miss something with that. We miss the communal aspect. If everything's locked away in one room, one office. Because there's a piece that's needed as a community of loving each other back into being. The sort of communal aspect of taking guilt away and restoring a sense of one's own value. This other word for sin, this idea of missing the mark, feels a lot like something in the South that we do really well. It has to do with shame. In the South, where I'm from, we have a pretty canny and honed ability that's ingrained to really feel a lot of shame and also to know how to use shame. I distinguish shame and guilt by this. I think shame is the sort of like all over icky feeling that I'm just bad. Something's just not okay with me. And that's really different than guilt and conviction because that's something like, something specific that you can figure out and point to and deal with. But the sort of overall feeling of shame, the sense of maybe I'm bad, is a lie. And so that's when we have this idea of God imputing righteousness. The reality is that, as we saw today, we're all made in the image of God, which means we're all sacred. Because we're made in the image of the divine. So therefore, we're all sacred. So actually, there's no way that at your core, you're bad. You're actually sacred and beautiful. And so there's a piece, too, of community and of the spiritual path that helps us open up to what that really means. What does that really mean? That's why Tom and I decided to sort of focus on grace in Lent, which seems a bit oxymoronic. The disciplines of grace in Lent. Now, I've been here a little while now, and I have observed that you guys are not exactly a testifying kind of church. You know what I mean? I mean, there's not like microphones set up, various places with a portion of the service dedicated to people coming up and bringing testimony. Has anyone experienced that here in churches? Testifying traditions? I know some of you have. I know, I see you. Yeah, that's right. I'm not suggesting that we do that, don't worry. By the way, for the rest of the service, I'm just kidding. there's something to be said for having places to do that. I mean, I have wondered, does that happen for this congregation, for these folks that I really have grown to love? Are there places where they can do that with each other? I don't know. No idea. I hope so. I think it's a really important thing. There's an ancient discipline, an ancient spiritual practice known as spiritual friendship. We don't do it a lot here, and it's not even just Christian. There's many, many religions that have this idea of spiritual friendship, where the main job of that relationship is to really encourage each other on your spiritual path. It's like the job of a spiritual friend is to help you track God's movement in your life, and also a place where you can be honest about where you're falling short, where you're stepping off the path, where you're just saying no. I've been blessed with a number of spiritual friends over the course of my life, and a couple for a long period of time. It's really an amazing gift. And just this week I got a call from one of these folks as I was on the train, and it was just that type of conversation where I know all of his relational patterns and the stuff that triggers him and all that stuff, and so he just said, blah, 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 trigger, trigger, pattern, pattern. And I said, yeah. I said, I know you. And he said, this is advanced Jedi recovery stuff. That's what he said. I said, yes, it is advanced Jedi recovery stuff. The work of the spiritual life is often that. But that's sort of silly sounding, but that's what I mean by this kind of connection where you can just put that out there in a really simple, easy way. Proverbs tells us that we sharpen each other like blades, that one friend sharpens another. Sort of help each other wear off the edges in those types of honest relationships. Jesus, I think, models this with his disciples. The confrontation, the ability to listen, that's key for spiritual friendship. You have to be able to listen. So as a shameless plug, I'll say that in a couple weeks, when we start our Lenten series, the one that Betsy is doing, right before that, I'm going to be doing a 3-week series on some spiritual disciplines, but including this art of spiritual friendship, sort of a spiritual friendship 101. What do you want to know? What would that look like? How do you find that in your life? If you have it, how do you nurture it more? And then finally, one of the richest parts of the text today, back to this idea of God as our hiding place and our refuge. It's ironic, this idea, because if we allow God to be our hiding place, then actually that's where we're found. Actually, that's where we're seen. We can curl up with God in that hiding place. So just imagine a fort, a little crazy fort of cushions for yourself, or whatever it may be, a tree house. You can go in there and you can curl up with God. You're fully known there, warts and all the good stuff too. And every day you can go there and you can fall apart and let it all go. And every day you can start anew and be restored and step back out into life lighter, with more peace in your hearts, with things having been lifted up. So it's Lent. I think if ever there was a good time to try it, I think it would be now. So let's find our hiding places. Let's say what needs to be said, and let's listen to God and to each other. Are you ready to be found?